A quiet hospital hallway. A pregnant woman lies bleeding on the floor. Her husband stands frozen in the doorway, watching. And the woman in the red dress who kicked her, she's already spinning her sigh. But what none of them know is that the man running this hospital isn't just any doctor. He's her uncle. And when he discovers what they've done to his niece, justice comes faster than anyone expects. This is a story about betrayal, survival, and one woman's fight to protect her unborn child when everyone she trusted chose cruelty over compassion. If you believe in standing up for what's right, stay with us until the end. And if this story moves you, show your support with a like. Drop a comment below and subscribe so you never miss stories that matter. Now, let's begin. The smell hit first. Antiseptic mixed with something metallic. Blood. Charlotte Brennan's vision blurred as she tried to focus on the white ceiling tiles above. Her hands moved instinctively to her belly, searching for the familiar roundness that had been her constant companion for 7 months. Still there, Buffon. But something felt wrong, and everything felt wrong. Charlie, a man's voice cut through the fog, deep, urgent, unfamiliar. Can you hear me? Someone get a gurney now. She tried to turn her head toward the voice, but pain shot through her spine. The last thing she remembered was standing in the exam room, arguing with Garrett. No, not just Garrett, her, Sienna, the woman in the red dress who smiled like a knife. My baby, Charlotte whispered. The words barely made it past her lips. Don't move. Strong hands pressed gently on her shoulders. You're going to be okay. We're getting you help. Through the haze, Charlotte saw him, a man in his late 50s, silver hair, sharp blue eyes filled with something that looked like recognition. He wore a white coat with a name badge she couldn't quite read. Do I know you? She managed. His face changed. Just for a second, his professional mask slipped. Charlie, it's Robert. Your Uncle Robert. The world tilted sideways. 15 years. It had been 15 years since she'd seen him. Not since her father and he had that terrible fight over her grandfather's estate. The family had fractured that day, and she'd lost her favorite uncle in the wreckage. Uncle Robert, her voice cracked. How are you here? I'm the director of this hospital. He squeezed her hand once, quickly. Then his professional demeanor snapped back into place. But right now, I'm just your doctor. Tell me what happened. Charlotte's throat tightened. Behind Robert, she could see Garrett standing in the doorway, her husband, the father of her child. He looked pale, scared, and when their eyes met, he looked away. She pushed me, Charlotte said. Each word cost her. Sienna, your mistress pushed me. Garrett, and you just stood there. That's not what happened, another voice said. Sienna appeared beside Garrett, her red dress now seeming obscene against the sterile white walls. She tripped. I tried to catch her, but she was too far away. It was an accident. You're lying. Charlotte tried to sit up, but Robert's hand stopped her. Nobody move, he commanded. His voice had steel in it now. Security, I need everyone who isn't medical staff out of this room immediately. A uniformed guard appeared, young, nervous, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. Sir, should I take statements? The guard asked. After my patient is stable. Robert looked at Garrett and Sienna with cold fury. Both of you did wait outside. Don't go far. The police will want to speak with you. Police? Sienna's voice went sharp. This was an accident. There's no need for... My niece is bleeding on my floor. Robert interrupted. Her baby's heart rate is dropping. I'm calling whoever I damn well please. The word niece hung in the air like a bomb. Charlotte watched Garrett's face change as he understood what that meant. The hospital director wasn't just some random doctor. He was family. Sienna grabbed Garrett's arm. We should go. Let them handle this. Handle this? Robert's voice could have frozen water. You mean handle the fact that a pregnant woman was assaulted in my hospital? Yes. We'll definitely handle it. Nobody was assaulted, Sienna insisted. But Charlotte heard it now, the slight tremor beneath the confidence. Fear. The monitor beside the bed began beeping faster, more urgent. A nurse rushed in, took one look at the numbers, and her face went pale. Doctor, we need to move her now. The baby's in distress. Everything accelerated. The gurney appeared. Hands lifted Charlotte with practiced efficiency. The ceiling tiles began moving past her vision as they wheeled her into the hallway. "Uncle Robert," she called out, "don't let them lie about what happened. Please, I won't." His face appeared above hers as they moved. "I promise you, Charlie, the truth will come out." As they rushed her toward the emergency wing, Charlotte caught one last glimpse of Garrett and Sienna in the hallway. They stood close together, heads bent in urgent conversation. Even now, even after everything, he chose her over his own wife and child. The tears came then, silent, hot, and full of a grief that had nothing to do with physical pain. "Hang on, sweetheart," Robert said softly. "Hang on for that baby. Hang on for yourself. You're stronger than you know." But Charlotte didn't feel strong. She felt broken, shattered into pieces that might never fit back together. The emergency room doors swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Bright lights, more people in scrubs, machines everywhere. Someone was counting down. Someone else was calling for blood. "She's hemorrhaging," a woman's voice announced. "Clinical. Detached. Start a transfusion," Robert ordered. "And get the OR ready. We might need to deliver early." Deliver early. The words cut through Charlotte's panic. Her baby. Her little girl who wasn't supposed to be born for another 2 months. Who needed more time to grow. To be ready for this world. "No," Charlotte gasped. "It's too soon. She's not ready." "We'll do everything we can," Robert promised. "But right now, we need to save both of you. Do you understand?" Charlotte wanted to argue, wanted to demand they find some other way. But she could feel it now, the wetness spreading beneath her, warm and terrifying. Her body was failing. The baby was failing. "Save her," Charlotte whispered. "Whatever you have to do, save my baby." Robert's hand found hers one more time. "I'll save you both. That's a promise." Then the anesthesiologist appeared with a mask, and the world began to fade. Her last conscious thought was a memory from childhood. Summer afternoon, fishing with Uncle Robert by the lake. He'd taught her how to cast, how to wait patiently for the fish to bite, how to reel it in without breaking the line. "Sometimes, Charlie," he'd said that day, "the strongest thing you can do is hold on when everything wants you to let go." She held on now. Through the darkness, through the fear, through the betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. She held on because her baby needed her to. Because somewhere in this nightmare, the truth was waiting. And because Uncle Robert had promised. And she'd always believed his promises. Even 15 years later. Even now. Charlotte adjusted the yoga mat for the third time, trying to find a comfortable position that didn't exist anymore. 7 months pregnant meant comfort was a relative concept. Her living room studio, usually a sanctuary of peace, felt suffocating this morning. Through the window, she could see the Chicago skyline glittering in the afternoon sun. Lincoln Park in autumn was beautiful. Their townhouse, with its exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, had once felt like a dream come true. Now it just felt empty. "Mrs. Brennan." Her phone buzzed with a text from Claire, her best friend and OB nurse. "Don't forget your appointment tomorrow at 2. Important ultrasound." Charlotte typed back quickly. Garrett promised he'd come this time. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, good. You need him there. Did she, though, lately, having Garrett present felt worse than his absence? At least, when he wasn't there, she could pretend the distance was just about work stress. When he was there, hollow-eyed and distracted, she couldn't avoid the truth anymore. Something had broken between them. The bedroom door opened upstairs. Garrett's footsteps on the hardwood. That familiar rhythm she'd once found comforting. Now it just made her tense. "I'm heading to the office," he called down. Not "good morning," not "how are you feeling," just a statement of departure. Charlotte stood slowly, one hand bracing her lower back. "Garrett, wait." He appeared at the top of the stairs. 35 years old and still handsome in that effortless way that had first attracted her. Dark hair, strong jawline, the kind of presence that commanded rooms. But his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. "What is it?" he asked. "I have a meeting at 9. "You always have a meeting." She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice, failed. "Do you remember what tomorrow is?" "It's Tuesday. It's the ultrasound. The important one. To check if the baby's positioned right or if I'll need a C-section. She watched his face, looking for any sign that he cared. You said you'd be there. Something flickered across his expression. Guilt, maybe, or annoyance. Right, tomorrow. I'll try to make it. Try. The word came out sharper than she intended. Garrett, this is your daughter. Our daughter. Don't you want to see her? Of course I do. But he still wouldn't look at her. It's just complicated right now. The Riverside development is in a critical phase. Investors are nervous about the market. If I'm not there to reassure them, I'm nervous too, Charlotte interrupted. I'm nervous about bringing a baby into a marriage where my husband can't even look at me anymore. Finally, his eyes met hers. And what she saw there was worse than anger or indifference. It was fear. He was afraid of her, of the baby, of the future they'd planned together. Charlotte, don't do this now. I said I'd try to be there. That should be enough. It's not enough. It hasn't been enough for months. Her hand moved to her belly, that automatic protective gesture. When did you stop loving me? The question hung between them like smoke. Garrett's jaw tightened. I never stopped. You're the one who changed. Everything became about the baby. Every conversation, every plan, every single thing revolves around this pregnancy. I don't even recognize you anymore. The words hit like physical blows. Charlotte felt her breath catch. I'm growing our child. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for you. That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Forget it. I'll be at the appointment tomorrow. 2:00. I'll be there. He turned to leave, and Charlotte saw it. Just for a second, his phone screen lit up with an incoming text. The name at the house, Sienna. Who's Sienna? The question came out before she could stop it. Garrett's back stiffened. A colleague from the marketing firm we're working with. You don't usually text colleagues at 7 in the morning. It's about work. His voice had gone cold now, defensive. Jesus, Charlotte. Now you're checking my phone. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've become paranoid. I didn't check anything. You left it on the counter last night. It was true, but only partially. She had looked. She'd seen the messages, dozens of them, late into the night. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the tone was wrong, too familiar, too warm. I have to go. Garrett started down the stairs, moving quickly now, eager to escape. We need to talk about this, Charlotte called after him. There's nothing to talk about. You're stressed, emotional, pregnancy hormones. We'll discuss it after the baby comes. The front door opened and closed. His car started in the driveway, and Charlotte was alone again in their beautiful, empty house. She walked to the window and watched his car disappear down the tree-lined street. In the reflection, she barely recognized herself. Swollen face, exhausted eyes, wearing the same maternity dress she'd worn for 3 days because nothing else fit anymore. When had she become someone her husband couldn't stand to be around? Her phone buzzed again. Claire's name appeared with a photo from last month's baby shower. They were laughing, surrounded by tiny pink outfits and ridiculous games. It felt like a lifetime ago. Are you okay? Claire's text asked. You didn't answer my last message. Charlotte's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to tell Claire everything, about Garrett's distance, about the mysterious Sienna, about the growing fear that her marriage was crumbling while her body prepared to bring new life into the world. But what could Claire do? What could anyone do? I'm fine, she typed instead. Just tired. See you tomorrow at the appointment. Another lie to add to the collection. Charlotte made her way back to the yoga mat, lowering herself carefully into a seated position. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the small kicks and movements of her daughter. It's just you and me, baby girl, she whispered. We'll figure this out together. The baby kicked again, as if in response. Outside, the city moved on with its business. Couples walked their dogs in the park. Joggers passed by in bright athletic gear. Life continuing its ordinary rhythms while Charlotte's world quietly fell apart. She thought about tomorrow's appointment, pictured Garrett actually showing up, holding her hand, watching the ultrasound screen with wonder the way he used to. Maybe seeing their daughter again would remind him of what mattered. Maybe this was just a phase, a rough patch that all couples went through. Maybe it would be okay. But deep in her chest, Beneath the hope and the fear, a small voice whispered the truth she wasn't ready to face. Nothing was going to be okay. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when the baby came. Garrett was slipping away, and she couldn't hold on tight enough to stop him. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Charlotte sat in the silence, one hand on her belly, the other pressed against her heart, and she waited for tomorrow, praying she was wrong about everything. The hospital parking lot was packed at 1:30. Charlotte circled twice before finding a spot, her hands shaking slightly. Garrett's car wasn't here yet. She checked her phone. No messages. Just the time 1:32. He still had time. He'd promised. Charlotte gathered her purse and medical folder, moving slowly. Everything took longer now. Getting out of the car, walking across the parking lot. Even breathing felt like work with the baby pressing against her lungs. Inside, the reception area buzzed with quiet activity. Pregnant women in various stages sat in cushioned chairs, some with partners, some alone. Charlotte tried not to notice which category she fell into. Charlotte? Claire appeared from a side hallway, her scrubs printed with tiny teddy bears. You're early. That's unlike you. Couldn't sleep last night. Charlotte hugged her friend carefully, belly between them. Is everything ready? All set. Dr. Richardson is running a few minutes behind, but we can get you checked in. Claire's eyes scanned the lobby. Is Garrett parking? Coming straight from a meeting. Should be here any minute. The lie tasted bitter, but Claire just smiled and nodded. They walked together down the hallway toward the examination rooms. Room 7, Claire said, opening the door. You know the drill. I'll be back in 5 to get your vitals. Charlotte changed into the hospital gown, folding her clothes neatly on the chair. The paper crinkled beneath her as she sat on the exam table. 2 o'clock approached, then passed, 2:05, 2:10. Her phone stayed silent. At 2:15, Claire returned with a blood pressure cuff. Her smile had gotten tighter. How are you feeling today? Tired. Anxious? Charlotte watched the numbers climb on the monitor. Is it high? A little elevated. Claire made a note. Have you been stressed? Before Charlotte could answer, the door opened. Her heart jumped, hoping to see Garrett. Instead, a young woman in a red dress stepped inside, late 20s, strikingly beautiful, with dark hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Oh, the woman said. This is the maternity wing. I must be in the wrong area. Can I help you? Claire asked, stepping protectively between the woman and Charlotte. I'm looking for the administrative offices. Meeting with the board about a marketing proposal. The woman's smile was perfect. Practiced. Sienna Ford, from Ford Marketing Group. The name hit Charlotte like cold water. Sienna. This was Sienna. The administrative offices are in the West Wing, Claire said coolly. This area is for patients only. Of course, my mistake. Sienna started to leave, then paused, looking back at Charlotte. Something flickered in her eyes. I hope everything goes well with your appointment. The door closed. Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. That was weird, Claire muttered. Charlotte couldn't speak. That was the woman texting her husband at 7 in the morning. And she was here, at Charlotte's hospital, on the day of Charlotte's ultrasound. Coincidence, the door opened again. This time it was Garrett. He looked harried, tie loosened, hair slightly messed. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. But Charlotte barely heard him. She was staring at the doorway where Sienna had stood moments ago. Who is Sienna Ford? The question came out flat. Garrett's face did something complicated. I told you, she's with the marketing firm we hired. Why, she was just here. In this hallway. Probably here for a meeting then. His voice stayed casual, but Charlotte saw the tension in his shoulders. It's a big hospital. Claire excused herself quietly, sensing the tension. After she left, silence grew heavy. Garrett sat in the corner chair, pulling out his phone immediately. Garrett, look at me. He did, reluctantly. Are you having an affair with her? The words hung in the air. Charlotte watched his face carefully. No. He said it firmly, but his eyes shifted away. She's a professional contact, that's all. Then why are you texting her at 7 in the morning? Because we're working on a $40 million development. It's not personal, it's business. Business doesn't usually involve texts about how much you miss talking to someone. Garrett's jaw tightened. You went through my phone. You left it open? I saw one message. That's all I needed. You saw one message out of context and decided I'm having an affair. This is exactly what I was talking about. You've become paranoid. Don't gaslight me. I know what I saw. Even if I was attracted to her, which I'm not saying I am, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm here, aren't I? The words, even if I was attracted to her, felt like a knife. So he was attracted to Sienna. He'd admitted it. Before Charlotte could respond, the door opened again, and Sienna walked in. Garrett, she smiled brightly. I thought that was your car in the parking lot. What are you doing here? Charlotte watched her husband's face cycle through emotions. Surprise, guilt, then resignation. Sienna, what are you doing here? The board meeting I mentioned. Sienna's eyes moved to Charlotte, taking in the hospital gown, the swollen belly. Oh, this must be your wife. Charlotte, Garrett said tightly. This is Sienna Ford. Pleasure. Sienna's smile never wavered. Garrett's told me so much about you. Funny, Charlotte said. He's barely mentioned you at all. The temperature dropped. Sienna's smile gained an edge. I actually stopped by to confirm our dinner meeting tonight. The investors from Toronto are flying in. Tonight, Charlotte's voice rose. You said you'd be home for dinner. We were going to talk about the birth plan. This just came up. It's important. Charlotte felt something inside her crack. You should go, she said quietly. What? No, I'm staying for the ultrasound. I don't want you here anymore. Not if you'd rather be somewhere else. Charlotte, don't be dramatic. Get out. The words exploded from her. Both of you, get out of my exam room. Claire burst through the door, alerted by the raised voices. What's going on? These people are leaving. Charlotte said, right now. Garrett looked at Sienna, then back at Charlotte, and in that glance, Charlotte saw her future collapse. He was choosing Sienna, even now. Fine, Claudette, he said coldly. I'll call you later when you've calmed down. They left together. Through the window, Charlotte watched them stop near the elevator, saw Sienna touch Garrett's arm, saw him not pull away. Something inside Charlotte shattered beyond repair. Claire moved to her side. Honey, you need to calm down. Your BP is spiking. I know. Charlotte pressed both hands against her belly. I just need a minute. But she didn't get a minute, because the door opened one more time, and Sienna stood there alone. I think we need to talk. Charlotte, get out. Just hear me. Sienna stepped fully into the room. You trapped Garrett with this pregnancy. You knew the marriage was failing, so you forced him into fatherhood. That's insane. We planned this baby. That's not what Garrett says. Sienna moved closer. He says you lied about birth control, that you deliberately got pregnant. That's a lie. Is it because, from where I'm standing, you look desperate? Sienna's smile was cruel. Garrett is with me now. Once that baby is born and the legal requirements are handled, he's going to leave you for me. Charlotte felt like she'd been hit. Get out. I know this is hard, but it's better you understand now. Sienna paused by the exam table. Oh, one more thing. That text you saw about missing him, that was about missing him in my bed. Just so we're clear. The words hung like poison. Charlotte tried to stand, to face this woman on equal ground. But as she swung her legs over the exam table, Sienna moved. It happened fast. Charlotte saw Sienna's expression change, saw calculation flash across her face. Then Sienna's foot was in Charlotte's path. Charlotte's weight was already committed, her center of gravity all wrong. She couldn't catch herself. She fell. Her hip struck the exam table hard. Pain exploded through her side. The ultrasound wand clattered to the floor. And then Charlotte was on the ground, both hands pressed against her belly. Oh my God. Claire dropped beside her. Don't move. Just breathe. She tripped. Sienna's voice came from above. I tried to catch her, but she fell too fast. You pushed her, Claire screamed. I saw you. Charlotte couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The pain radiated through her abdomen. And worst of all was the sudden absence of movement in her belly. The baby had stopped kicking. No, Charlotte gasped. Please, no. Dr. Richardson burst in, dropping to the floor. Claire, call a code. Get me a fetal monitor now. And someone find Dr. Brennan. Who's Dr. Brennan? Sienna asked. The director of this hospital. Dr. Richardson said coldly. And Charlotte's uncle, so I'd suggest you start praying that baby is okay. The color drained from Sienna's face. Security arrived. Sienna started backing toward the door, insisting it was an accident. But Charlotte wasn't listening. She was focused on the terrifying stillness where her daughter's kicks should be. Claire returned with the portable monitor. For horrible seconds, there was nothing but static. Then, faint but present, a heartbeat. She's there, Claire's voice broke. Her heart's still beating. But the numbers were wrong. Charlotte could see it on Dr. Richardson's face. We need to move her now, the doctor ordered. Prep the OR. This is a placental abruption. Everything moved fast then, hands lifting Charlotte onto a gurney, ceiling tiles passing above, voices calling medical terms. And through it all, Charlotte could only think about the baby who'd stopped kicking. As they rushed her down the hallway, Charlotte saw Garrett near the elevators. He looked shocked, starting to move toward her. But Sienna grabbed his arm, whispering in his ear, and Garrett hesitated. Charlotte closed her eyes. She didn't want to see which one he chose. She already knew. Charlotte tried to focus on her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, but her heart was racing, and the baby was kicking hard, sensing her distress. Honey, you need to calm down. Claire checked the blood pressure monitor, her face creasing with concern. 140/90, that's preeclampsia territory. I know. Charlotte pressed both hands against her belly. I just can't believe he brought her here. Did he know she'd be here? I don't know. Does it matter? Charlotte felt tears threatening. He's having an affair. Claire, I'm not paranoid. Claire sat on the edge of the exam table, putting her arm around Charlotte's shoulders. What do you want to do about him, and what can I do? I'm 7 months pregnant. I can barely walk. It's not over until you say it is. A knock interrupted them. Dr. Richardson entered, washing her hands at the sink. I hear we've had some excitement. How are we feeling, Charlotte? The baby's moving a lot. More than usual. And I have a headache. Dr. Richardson nodded, making notes. Blood pressure is concerning. Charlotte, if this doesn't come down, we might need to talk about early delivery. How early? 30 weeks is risky but survivable. We'd prefer to get you to 34 if possible. Charlotte did the math. She was just past 30 weeks now. Every day mattered. Dr. Richardson prepared the ultrasound machine while Claire dimmed the lights. The gel was cold against Charlotte's belly. The image appeared black and white and gray, but unmistakably her daughter. There's her head, Dr. Richardson pointed. She's measuring right on track. Heartbeat is strong, 145. Position looks good too. Charlotte felt her heart squeeze. Her baby girl, perfect and unaware of the chaos waiting. The door opened again. Charlotte tensed, expecting Garrett, but it was Sienna. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But I think we need to talk, Charlotte. Excuse me. Dr. Richardson stood immediately. This is a private medical appointment. You need to leave. I will, in just a moment. Sienna stepped fully into the room, closing the door. But first, Charlotte and I need to clear the air. There's nothing to clear, Charlotte said. You're sleeping with my husband. That's the whole story. Actually, it's not. Sienna moved closer. Claire positioned herself protectively between them. The story is that you trapped Garrett with this pregnancy. You knew the marriage was failing, so you stopped taking birth control and forced him into fatherhood. That's insane. We planned this baby. That's not what Garrett says. Sienna's smile was cruel. He says you deliberately got pregnant to save a marriage that was already over. That's a lie. Is it because from where I'm standing, you look desperate? That's enough. Dr. Richardson moved toward the door. I'm calling security. In a minute, Sienna's eyes never left Charlotte's face. I just want her to understand. Garrett is with me now, emotionally, and once that baby is born and the legal requirements are handled, he's going to leave you for me. Charlotte felt like she'd been hit, the casual cruelty of it. Get out, Charlotte whispered. I know this is hard to hear, but it's better you understand now. Sienna paused. Oh, Charlotte, that text you saw on Garrett hit his phone and about missing him, That was about missing him in my bed. Just so we're clear, the words hung in the air like poison. Charlotte tried to stand, to face this woman on equal ground instead of lying vulnerable. But as she swung her legs over the side, Sienna moved. It happened fast. Charlotte saw Sienna's expression change, saw calculation flash across her face, and then Sienna's foot was in Charlotte's path. Charlotte's weight was already committed, her center of gravity all wrong with the pregnancy. She couldn't catch herself. She fell. Her hips struck the edge of the exam table hard. Pain exploded through her side. The ultrasound wand clattered to the floor. Charlotte was on the ground, curled on her side, both hands pressed against her belly. "Oh my God." Claire dropped to her knees. "Don't move. Just breathe." She tripped. Sienna's voice came from above. "I tried to catch her, but she fell too fast." "You pushed her," Claire screamed. "I saw you extend your leg deliberately." "That's not what happened. She was already falling." Charlotte couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The pain radiated through her entire abdomen, and worst of all was the sudden absence of movement in her belly. The baby had stopped kicking. "No," Charlotte gasped. "Please, no." Dr. Richardson was on the floor now, her hands moving over Charlotte's abdomen, her face grave. "Claire, call a code. Get me a fetal monitor now. And someone find Dr. Brennan." "Who's Dr. Brennan?" Sienna asked. "The director of this hospital," Dr. Richardson said coldly. "And Charlotte's uncle. So I'd suggest you start praying that baby is okay." The color drained from Sienna's face. "Her uncle is the hospital director. Did I stutter? Now get out before I have you arrested for assault." Security arrived. Sienna started backing toward the door, insisting it was an accident. But Charlotte wasn't listening. She was focused on the absence of movement, the terrifying stillness where her daughter's kicks should be. Claire returned with the portable fetal monitor, her hands shaking. For horrible seconds, there was nothing but static. Then, faint but present, a heartbeat. "She's there," Claire's voice broke with relief. Her heart's still beating, but the monitor numbers were wrong. Charlotte could see it on Dr. Richardson's face. The heart rate that should have been in the 140s was barely breaking 100. "We need to move her now," Dr. Richardson ordered. "Prep the OR. Call obstetrics and anesthesia. This is a placental abruption." And someone paged Dr. Brennan immediately. Everything started moving fast, hands lifting Charlotte onto a gurney, the ceiling tiles passing above in a blur, voices calling out medical terms she didn't understand. And through it all, the only thing Charlotte could think about was the baby who'd stopped kicking, the daughter she might lose, because of a woman in a red dress and a husband who chose her. As they rushed her down the hallway toward the emergency wing, Charlotte saw Garrett standing near the elevators. He looked shocked, confused, starting to move toward her. But Sienna grabbed his arm, pulling him back, whispering urgently in his ear. And Garrett hesitated. He stood there, torn between his wife bleeding on a gurney and the woman who'd caused it. Charlotte closed her eyes. She didn't want to see which one he chose. She already knew. The operating room was freezing. Charlotte couldn't stop shaking. The lights above were painfully bright, and voices surrounded her, too many to count. "Heart rate's dropping again," someone said. "We need to move faster. Patient's pressure is unstable. We can't wait. We need to deliver now." Dr. Richardson's voice tight with stress. "Where the hell is Brennan?" Charlotte tried to speak, to ask about her baby, but the oxygen mask muffled everything. She felt hands on her belly, the sharp sting of an IV. "Charlotte, can you hear me?" Dr. Richardson's face appeared above her. "We need to do an emergency C-section. The baby's in distress. Do you understand?" Charlotte nodded weakly. "We're going to put you under. When you wake up, you'll be a mother." The OR doors burst open. "Nobody puts her under until I've seen the scans." A man's voice, deep and commanding. "I'm taking over this case." Through the haze, Charlotte saw him, tall, silver-haired, wearing surgical scrubs. His blue eyes were familiar in a way that made her heart squeeze. "Uncle Robert." The words came out slurred. He was at her side immediately, his hand finding hers. "I'm here, Charlie. Everything's going to be okay." "The baby. We're going to save her. Both of you, I promise." Dr. Richardson looked relieved to hand over control. "Dr. Brennan, we have a potential placental abruption. Patient fell approximately 10 minutes ago. Fetal heart rate has dropped from 145 to 95. Robert's jaw tightened, but his hands moving over Charlotte's belly were gentle. How far along? 30 weeks. 2 days. NICU standing by. Yes, sir. Good. He looked down at Charlotte. Charlie, I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? She nodded. Tell me what happened. Who did this to you? Sienna. Charlotte managed. She pushed me, or tripped me. Uncle Robert, she did it on purpose. His expression went hard as stone. Are there witnesses? Claire. And Dr. Richardson. Good. He squeezed her hand. Let's bring this baby safely into the world. Someone page security. Nobody leaves this hospital until I've gotten statements. Especially not a woman in a red dress named Sienna Ford. Sir, there's a man in the waiting room, a nurse reported. Says he's her husband. Garrett Brennan. Tell him he can wait. And tell him his wife is with family now. Real family. The nurse left. Robert turned back to Charlotte. I'm going to save your daughter, Charlie, and then I'm going to make sure everyone who hurt you answers for it. Why? Charlotte's vision blurred. We haven't spoken in 15 years. You're my niece. That makes you family. No matter how many years have passed. His voice softened. I've regretted every day of that silence. But I'm here now, and I'm not letting you face this alone. Tears slipped down Charlotte's face. I'm scared. I know, but I've delivered thousands of babies. Not one of them had something you have. What's that? Me. And I am very good at my job. He nodded to the anesthesiologist. Put her under. Let's bring this baby home. The mask came down fully. Charlotte tried to keep her eyes open, but the drugs pulled her down. The last thing she heard was Robert's voice. Don't worry, little one. Uncle Robert's got you. Time became strange. Charlotte floated through awareness, catching fragments. A baby crying. Robert's voice, she's breathing on her own, thank God. Machines beeping. When she finally surfaced, the bright ore lights had been replaced by softer recovery room glow. Her abdomen ached deeply. Easy. Robert was beside her immediately. Don't try to sit up yet. The baby? She's in the NICU, 3 pounds, 1 ounce, small but mighty. Robert's smile was tired but genuine. She came out fighting. Is she okay? She's on oxygen and being monitored closely. The next 48 hours are critical. But Charlie, she's alive. You are both alive. Charlotte closed her eyes, relief and fear warring inside her. Can I see her? Once you're stable, we'll take you down. Robert pulled a chair close. But Charlotte, I need to talk to you about what happens next. The police are here. They want your statement about what happened. She did it on purpose, I'm sure of it. I believe you, but the footage is ambiguous. We need your testimony. His voice was firm. Sienna has already lawyered up. She's claiming it was an accident. So she's just going to get away with it. I didn't say that. She attacked someone in my hospital, on camera, with witnesses, and I will not rest until she pays. Robert's voice went hard. But I need you strong enough to fight this. Can you do that? Charlotte thought about her tiny daughter fighting for every breath. Yes, she said. I can fight. Good. Then let's start now. The detective is waiting outside. What about Garrett? Robert's expression darkened. He's made several attempts to see you. I've denied them all. As your physician, I have authority to restrict visitation if I believe it would harm your recovery. Thank you. This is what family does. We protect each other. He moved toward the door, then paused. Charlie, the argument between your father and me 15 years ago, it was my fault. I was angry and proud and stupid. Finding you here, seeing you hurt, knowing you were alone, it made me realize I've wasted 15 years. I can't get those back, but I can be here now. For you and for that little fighter in the NICU. If you'll let me. Charlotte felt tears threatening. I'd like that. Good. Then let's get that statement taken care of so we can focus on getting you healthy and getting your daughter home. He left to fetch the detective. Charlotte lay in the bed, one hand resting on her bandaged abdomen, feeling the absence of the baby who'd been there for 7 months. Her daughter was alive. That was what mattered. But as she prepared to tell her story, Charlotte made a quiet promise. She would fight. for justice, for the future her daughter deserved, for every woman who'd been hurt by someone who thought they were untouchable. She would fight. And with Uncle Robert beside her, maybe she could win. Detective Sarah Morrison was younger than Charlotte expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat beside the hospital bed, a small recording device on the table. Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you some questions about the incident in examination room 7. Do you feel well enough to talk? Yes. I want to tell you everything. Charlotte stated her name for the record, then launched into the story, finding the hotel receipt, the text from Sienna, the appointment where Sienna appeared, first in the hallway, then in the exam room. Detective Morrison took notes, her expression neutral but attentive. Tell me about the moment you fell. Details matter. Charlotte closed her eyes, forcing herself back into that room. I was sitting on the exam table. Sienna was saying terrible things about how Garrett was leaving me, how I'd trapped him. I stood up because I wanted to face her. As I swung my legs over, she moved closer. I saw her face change. She looked calculating, like she'd made a decision. And her leg moved. It was subtle, but deliberate. She extended her foot right into my path. Could it have been accidental? No, I've taught yoga for 8 years. I know body mechanics. That movement was deliberate. You said there were witnesses. Dr. Richardson and a nurse named Claire. Yes, Claire was right there. Detective Morrison made notes. I'll interview them both. Mrs. Brennan, I have to be honest. Assault cases are hard to prove, especially when video evidence is ambiguous. It often comes down to testimony, and defense attorneys will argue you were emotional, that pregnancy hormones clouded your perception. They'll say I'm crazy. They'll say you misinterpreted an accident because you wanted someone to blame for your marriage falling apart. Detective Morrison's voice was matter of fact. This case will get ugly. I understand. You, the media, will get hold of this. Your life becomes public. Your husband will hire lawyers who will paint you as unstable. Are you prepared? Charlotte thought about her daughter in the NICU. I have a question. Do you have children, Detective? 2 daughters, 12 and 9. If someone hurt one of them deliberately, would you care how ugly the fight got? Detective Morrison's expression softened. I'd burn the world down. Then you understand. That's my daughter in the NICU. She was born 10 weeks early because of what happened. She weighs 3 pounds and might not survive. So no, I don't care how ugly this gets. I care about the truth. Okay then, Detective Morrison stood. I'm going to interview the other witnesses and review the footage again. One more thing, do you believe your husband knew what Sienna Ford was planning? The question hit Charlotte hard. Had Garrett known? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. After the detective left, Claire entered, eyes red from crying. Hey, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. Claire sat on the bed edge. Charlie, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped her from coming in. This isn't your fault. She's responsible. Charlotte squeezed Claire's hand. But I need to ask, when I fell, did you see Sienna's foot? Did you see her deliberately trip me? Claire was quiet. Honestly, it happened so fast. She was moving toward you. You were standing, and then you were on the ground. I saw her leg was extended, but in court, could I say beyond doubt it was intentional? I don't know, Charlie. It was honest, but not what Charlotte wanted to hear. What about Dr. Richardson? She was focused on the ultrasound machine. By the time she turned around, you were already falling. Claire wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. It's what I need to hear. I have to know what kind of case I actually have. Charlotte took a breath. Tell me about the baby. Claire's face brightened. I checked on her. She's tiny but strong. The NICU nurses say she's a fighter. Does she have a name yet? Charlotte hadn't thought about it. All the names she and Garrett had discussed felt wrong now. Hope, Charlotte said suddenly. Her name is Hope. Claire smiled through tears. That's perfect. Can I see her now? Let me check with the nurse. After Claire left, Uncle Robert returned. Good news. You're stable enough to see Hope. He helped her sit up slowly. Charlie, I spoke with Detective Morrison. The testimonies are helpful but not definitive. This will be difficult to prosecute. I know, but there's something else. Robert showed her his phone, a screenshot from Sienna's social media, Posted 3 months ago. Pregnancy is a trap women use to control men. Real power comes from freedom. Hashtag child-free, no regrets. She posted this publicly. She did? And there's more. Robert has scrolled through posts. A whole series about women who weaponize pregnancy. It establishes motive. Can Detective Morrison use this? She's already compiling it. Along with something else, Sienna was sued by a previous employer 2 years ago. The case was settled and sealed. But I have connections. The plaintiff was a pregnant woman who claimed harassment. There was an incident where the woman fell downstairs. She miscarried. Charlotte felt sick. Sienna caused that. The case settled before trial, so nothing was proven. But the pattern's there. 2 pregnant women, 2 falls. Robert's expression was grim. That's not coincidence. That's a predator. Why wasn't she charged? Money, power, good lawyers. He put his phone away. But this time is different. This time she attacked someone in my hospital, on camera, with witnesses. And I will not rest until she pays. A wheelchair arrived. Robert helped Charlotte transfer, each movement sending pain through her abdomen. This is going to hurt for a while. You had major surgery. I don't care about the pain. I just want to see my daughter. They made their way through hallways to the NICU on the 4th floor. The doors required security codes. Inside, the lighting was softer, with rows of incubators housing tiny humans. She's in Bay 3, Robert said, and then Charlotte saw her. Hope, so small she barely seemed real. Tubes and wires covered her tiny body. A breathing apparatus over her nose and mouth. Monitors beeping steadily. But she was alive, moving slightly. Her tiny chest rising and falling. Can I touch her? A NICU nurse appeared, kind and young. Through the ports, yes. Charlotte reached through the circular opening, her hand trembling. Her finger touched Hope's palm, and instantly, miraculously, the tiny fingers closed around it. She knows you, the nurse said softly. Babies always know their mothers. Charlotte couldn't speak. This perfect, fragile life, holding on with everything she had. Hello, baby girl, Charlotte finally whispered. I'm your mama, and I promise you, I will fight for you. I will make sure everyone who hurt us answers for it. You just focus on getting strong. That's your only job. Hope's grip tightened slightly, and Charlotte knew that no matter how hard the fight ahead would be, she would see it through. For Hope, for herself, for every woman who'd ever been hurt by someone who thought they were too powerful to face consequences. She would fight, and she would win. 3 days passed in a blur of pain medication, NICU visits, and police interviews. On the 4th morning, Uncle Robert found Charlotte attempting to walk the hallway, her first real exercise post-surgery. We need to talk, privately. Back in her room, he showed her his tablet. A news headline screamed, Millionaire's pregnant wife assaulted in hospital, Mistress accused. It went public, Charlotte said flatly. It gets worse. Robert scrolled through the article. Sienna's lawyer released a statement claiming you attacked her first, that you were hysterical, and she was defending herself. They're suggesting you have a history of instability. That's insane. And Charlotte, there's more. Garrett filed for emergency custody of Hope. He's claiming you're mentally unfit to make medical decisions. The room tilted. Charlotte grabbed the bed rail. He what? His lawyers filed this morning. They're using your hospitalization, the assault allegation, even your blood pressure issues as evidence. The hearing is tomorrow. He can't do this. She's my daughter. I know. We'll fight it. But Charlotte, understand what's happening. Garrett is protecting himself. If he can paint you as unstable, it makes Sienna's version more credible. That's not what happened. I believe you, but we need proof, not just testimony. The footage is ambiguous. The witnesses can't swear it was intentional, and now Garrett's lawyers are overwhelming us with motions. Robert rubbed his eyes, exhausted. The hospital board called an emergency meeting. They're concerned about liability. They're pressuring me to settle quietly. Settle? Pay you damages in exchange for dropping charges. Make it go away. No, absolutely not. That's what I told them. But I need you to know fighting this could cost me my position. The board is questioning whether I can be objective given our family connection. Charlotte looked at her uncle. He'd saved her life. saved her daughter, and now risked his career. You don't have to do this. I can't ask you to sacrifice everything. You're not asking. I'm choosing. Robert's voice was firm. I lost 15 years with you because of pride. I'm not losing you again. Before Charlotte could respond, Claire burst in, phone in hand. You need to see this. She showed a social media post, a video taken from a phone camera, showing the hallway outside exam room 7 through the door window. Voices came through clearly, including Sienna saying, Garrett is with me now. Once that baby is born, he's going to leave you for me. Then Charlotte's cry, and Sienna's voice, she tripped. Where did this come from? Charlotte asked. Another patient in the waiting area. She heard shouting and started recording. Claire's voice rose with excitement. Charlie, you can hear everything Sienna said. And there's more. The woman who took this video came forward. She says she saw Sienna extend her leg through the door window. She's willing to testify. Who is she? Her name is Anna Campbell. She was there for a prenatal appointment. No connection to you or Garrett. Just a random witness. Charlotte felt hope flare. Will Detective Morrison talk to her? Already did. Anna gave a full statement. Claire sat beside Charlotte. We have corroboration now. Not just your word against Sienna's. Robert was already on his phone. I'm calling the hospital's legal team. This changes everything. As he stepped out, Charlotte turned to Claire. What happens now? Now the district attorney decides if they have enough to press charges. Assault, reckless endangerment, maybe more. Claire squeezed her hand. And tomorrow, you fight for custody. I can't lose her, Claire. You won't. We won't let that happen. That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching city lights blur through her tears. Hope was stable but critical. Garrett was trying to take her away. Sienna was playing innocent on every news channel. A soft knock made her turn. Uncle Robert stood in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. It's decaf. He sat in the visitor's chair. Can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see her. Sienna. That look on her face right before I fell. Someone broken, he said quietly. Someone who's been hurt so badly they want everyone else to hurt too. That doesn't excuse it. No, it doesn't. But understanding evil doesn't mean forgiving it. He sipped his coffee. Charlotte, tomorrow is going to be hard. Garrett's lawyers will try to make you look unstable. They'll bring up your blood pressure, your emotional state. You need to be prepared. I am prepared. Are you, because they're going to say you're an unfit mother? Can you handle hearing that without breaking down? Charlotte thought about Hope in the NICU, about watching her fight for every breath. They can say whatever they want. I know the truth. I'm Hope's mother. I carried her for 7 months. I almost died bringing her into this world. No judge gets to tell me I'm not enough. Robert smiled. There she is. There's the fighter I remember. You barely know me now. We've been apart 15 years. Some things don't change. You were stubborn at 5. I see that same stubbornness now. He set down his coffee. Your father would be proud of you for standing up, for fighting back. Don't, Charlotte's voice cracked. Don't talk about him. The last thing I said was that I hated him for the fight with you. Then 6 months later, he had a heart attack. Those were my last words to my father. The secret she'd carried for 13 years spilled out. Robert was quiet, then said, Your father knew you didn't hate him. Parents understand children say things they don't mean when hurt. And Charlotte, the fight between us was my fault. All mine. I was greedy and selfish. That's on me, not him, not you. But I never got to tell him I was sorry. He knew, trust me, he knew. Robert stood, moving to the window. And I think he'd forgive me for being absent if he knew I was here now, helping his daughter through the hardest fight of her life. Charlotte leaned her head against his arm. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. But fear also makes us sharp, makes us fight harder. He put his arm around her shoulders. Tomorrow, we show them exactly who Charlotte Brennan is. Not a victim, a mother fighting for her child. And there is nothing more dangerous than that. What if we lose? We won't. But even if the worst happens, we appeal, we fight, We keep going until we win. His voice was absolute. I didn't save you in hope just to let some judge hand her over to a man who abandoned you both. Charlotte felt determination settle in her chest. Okay, let's do this. That's my girl. Robert squeezed her shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow we change the narrative. After he left, Charlotte pulled up the photo of Hope on her phone. 3 pounds of pure determination. I'm going to win this for you, Charlotte whispered. I promise. And for the first time since the assault, Charlotte actually believed it. The courthouse was nothing like Charlotte expected. The family court was just a small room with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly. Uncle Robert wheeled her in. She was still too weak to walk long distances. Claire sat directly behind them. On the other side, Garrett sat with 3 lawyers in expensive suits. He wouldn't look at Charlotte. Beside him sat Sienna Ford. What is she doing here? Charlotte hissed. Garrett can bring whoever he wants. Their lawyer, Margaret Foster, replied. Ignore her. Focus on the judge. Judge Patricia Winters entered. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Charlotte prayed those eyes could see the truth. This is an emergency custody hearing regarding Hope Brennan, currently hospitalized in the NICU. Mr. Brennan, you filed claiming Mrs. Brennan is unfit to make medical decisions. Is that correct? Garrett's lead lawyer, Richard Sullivan, stood. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Brennan has demonstrated instability, culminating in a violent altercation that directly led to premature birth. We believe the child's safety requires medical decisions be placed solely in Mr. Brennan's hands. Charlotte felt rage building, but Margaret's hand on her arm stopped her. Mrs. Brennan, Judge Winters looked at Charlotte. How do you respond? Margaret stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Brennan did not engage in any violent altercation. She was the victim of an assault while undergoing a routine medical examination. She nearly died protecting her child. The allegation that she's unfit is baseless and offensive. Let's hear from Mr. Brennan directly, Judge Winters said. Mr. Brennan, please take the stand. Garrett moved to the witness box with practiced confidence. He swore to tell the truth and sat down. Mr. Brennan, Sullivan began, can you describe your wife's mental state in the weeks leading up to the incident? Objection, Margaret said. Mr. Brennan isn't a mental health professional. I'll allow it, but stick to observable facts. Garrett nodded. Charlotte had become increasingly paranoid. She accused me of having an affair without evidence. She would check my phone, question where I was going. The pregnancy seemed to make her emotional and irrational. Each word was a knife. Charlotte listened to her husband rewrite their marriage. Were you having an affair? Sullivan asked. No. I had business dealings with Miss Ford, but nothing inappropriate occurred until after Charlotte attacked her. That's a lie, Charlotte said aloud. Judge Winters looked at her sternly. Mrs. Brennan, you'll have your chance to testify. Right now, please remain silent. Sullivan continued. What happened at the hospital from your perspective? I arrived as promised. Charlotte was already agitated. When Miss Ford appeared for an unrelated meeting, Charlotte became hysterical. She attacked Ford verbally and then physically. In the struggle, Charlotte fell. And after the fall, Charlotte was rushed into emergency surgery. Our daughter was born 10 weeks premature because of Charlotte's actions. Garrett's voice cracked convincingly. I just want to protect my daughter from further harm. Margaret Foster stood for cross-examination. Mr. Brennan, you say you weren't having an affair with Miss Ford, yet she's here supporting you. Is that normal for a business associate? She's a witness to Charlotte's attack. Attack. Did you tell your wife Miss Ford would be at the hospital that day? I knew she had a meeting scheduled. Yes. Did you tell your wife? No, I didn't think it mattered. You didn't think your wife would want to know the woman she suspected you of having an affair with would be present at her medical appointment. Objection, Sullivan was on his feet. No affair has been proven. Sustained, Judge Winters said. Ms. Foster, rephrase. Mr. Brennan, you testified nothing inappropriate happened with Miss Ford until after the hospital incident. What exactly did you mean by after? Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Ford and I became closer after Charlotte's accusations destroyed my marriage. She provided emotional support. So you started a relationship with the woman your wife accused you of cheating with? immediately after your wife gave birth prematurely. Is that correct? It is not like that. How is it, Brennan? Because it looks like you're rewriting history to justify your actions. My action, Charlotte is the one who what, got upset that her husband brought another woman to her pregnancy appointment. Sullivan objected repeatedly. But the damage was done. No further questions, Margaret said. Mrs. Brennan, Judge Winters said. Your turn. Charlotte wheeled herself to the witness box with Robert's help. She raised her hand and swore to tell the truth. Mrs. Brennan, Margaret began gently, tell us what happened at the hospital. Charlotte took a breath and told the story simply. Garrett bringing Sienna's cruel words. The fall. Waking up to find her own daughter born too early. Did you attack Ms. Ford? No, I never touched her. As I moved, she deliberately extended her leg. I saw her face change. She made a choice. Are you certain it was deliberate? As certain as I am of anything? Do you love your daughter more than my own life? Do you want what's best for her? Always. Charlotte's voice broke. That's why I'm fighting. Because she deserves better than a father who abandoned her and a system that wants to take her from the only parent who's been there. Sullivan's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned her blood pressure, her emotional state, her ability to make decisions under stress. But Charlotte didn't break. For every attack, she had an answer. When it was over, Judge Winters called a recess. 20 minutes later, they reconvened. I've reviewed the evidence and listened to both testimonies. This is complicated with serious allegations on both sides. However, there is one undeniable fact. Hope Brennan is in the NICU fighting for her life. She needs stability and parents who can put her needs first. Charlotte held her breath. Mr. Brennan, your actions in bringing Ms. Ford to your wife's appointment showed remarkably poor judgment. Whether or not you were having an affair, you created a volatile situation that contributed to the incident. Garrett's face went pale. Mrs. Brennan, your medical records show significant stress prior to the incident. While I don't believe you deliberately caused your fall, I am concerned about your emotional state. Charlotte felt her heart sink. Therefore, I'm ordering joint medical custody with Dr. Robert Brennan as the deciding vote in case of disagreement. This gives both parents input while providing a neutral medical professional to ensure Hope's best interests. Your Honor, Sullivan started. I'm not finished. Mr. Brennan, you will have supervised visitation only. The supervisor will be a hospital social worker. Ms. Ford is not to be present during any visits. If I find you violated this order, I will revisit custody entirely. Garrett looked stunned. Mrs. Brennan, you will undergo a psychological evaluation. If it shows you're stable, we'll revisit full custody in 30 days. Until then, Brennan will assist with major medical decisions. It wasn't everything Charlotte wanted, but it was something. Hope wouldn't be taken away. Garrett wouldn't have control, and Uncle Robert would protect them both. This hearing is adjourned. That evening, Charlotte sat beside Hope's incubator, her finger held by tiny perfect fingers, and made a promise. It's not over, baby girl. The fight's not done, but we're going to win. I promise you. And somewhere in her exhausted soul, Charlotte believed it. She had to, because the alternative was unthinkable. 6 weeks later, Charlotte stood outside the criminal courthouse, Hope in her arms. The baby had finally come home from the NICU 3 days ago, still tiny at 5 pounds, but healthy and strong. You ready? Uncle Robert asked. Charlotte adjusted Hope's blanket against the October wind. As ready as I'll ever be. The district attorney had moved forward with charges against Sienna Ford, assault, reckless endangerment. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Charlotte saw Claire, Margaret Foster, several nurses from the hospital. On the other side sat Sienna, composed in a cream suit that screamed innocence. Mrs. Brennan, a woman approached, mid-40s, with intelligent eyes. I'm Kate Morrison, Assistant District Attorney. I'll be prosecuting this case. Detective Morrison mentioned you. We've been working together closely. Kate looked down at Hope. She's beautiful. How's she doing? Thriving. The doctors say she's a miracle. Good, because we're going to make sure the person who put her at risk pays for it. Kate's voice hardened. Mrs. Brennan, I want to be honest. This case is challenging. The defense will argue accident, bring up your emotional state, your blood pressure. They'll create reasonable doubt. I know, but we have advantages. The audio recording, Anna Campbell's testimony, and something else we found Sienna's previous victim. The woman from the lawsuit 2 years ago. She's willing to testify about the pattern. Charlotte felt hope surge. Can she do that? We're arguing it establishes a pattern of behavior. The defense will fight it, but if we make our case, Judge Blackwell might allow it. Hope started fussing. Charlotte rocked her gently. Win or lose, this trial will be hard, Kate said quietly. You'll relive the assault, watch your private life dissected. Are you prepared? Charlotte looked down at Hope. I gave birth 10 weeks early because of what she did. My daughter spent her first month fighting to breathe. So yes, I'm prepared. Because if we don't stop Sienna now, she'll do this to someone else. Kate nodded approvingly. Then let's go get justice. The trial began with opening statements. Sullivan, representing Sienna, painted a picture of a disturbed woman whose paranoia led to tragedy. Kate countered with cold facts Sienna's history, her social media posts about pregnancy being a trap, the audio recording. The jury 8 women, 4 men listened intently. Charlotte testified first, telling her story with Sienna sitting 20 feet away. Sullivan's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Brennan, you admit you were under significant stress that day. Yes. High blood pressure, emotional distress, marital problems, all caused by my husband's affair with your client. Objection, Sullivan said. Sustained, Judge Blackwell ruled. Answer only the questions asked, Sullivan continued. In such a state, isn't it possible you simply lost your balance, that you're attributing malice to what was an accident? No, I saw her face. I saw her make the choice. You saw what you wanted to see. I saw the truth. Charlotte held firm through every attack her relationship with Uncle Robert. Her blood pressure, her emotional state. She'd lived this nightmare. No lawyer could make her doubt that. Claire testified about what she'd seen. Anna Campbell described watching through the door window. NICU doctors testified about Hope's condition, the trauma that caused premature birth. Then Kate called her surprise witness. The prosecution calls Rachel Montgomery. A woman in her early 30s took the stand, nervous but determined. Ms. Montgomery, do you know the defendant? Yes, she was my supervisor 2 years ago at Bradford Marketing Group. What was your relationship like? At first, fine, but then I got pregnant. Everything changed. Sienna started making comments about how pregnancy made women weak, how it was unfair men had to support unwanted children. What happened next? One day, I was carrying files upstairs. Sienna was at the top. As I walked up, she shifted. Her leg extended. I tripped and fell down a full flight. Rachel wiped tears. I lost my baby. 18 weeks pregnant, and I lost my baby. The courtroom was silent. Did you report this? I tried, but Sienna claimed I was clumsy. The company offered a settlement if I signed an NDA. I was traumatized, broke, grieving. I took the money. And when you heard about Mrs. Brennan, I knew it was the same thing, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. Sullivan's cross-examination was vicious, attacking Rachel's credibility, her settlement, her timing, but she didn't break. She hates pregnant women, Rachel said finally. I don't know why, but she sees pregnancy as weakness and punishes it. That's what she did to me. That's what she did to Charlotte Brennan. And if you don't stop her, she'll do it again. The defense called Sienna. She was perfect, tearful when appropriate, composed when necessary. She denied everything. The assault was an accident. Rachel was lying for attention. Charlotte was unstable. But when Kate cross-examined her, cracks appeared. Ms. Ford, Kate said, pulling up Sienna's social media, you've written extensively about your views on pregnancy. You've called it a trap, a weapon. Do you still believe that? Those posts were taken out of context. Context. Let me read this. Pregnancy is the ultimate manipulation. Biology as blackmail. How is that out of context? I was speaking philosophically. You called pregnant women manipulators, and then you assaulted one. That's not philosophy. That's pattern. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Kate played the audio recording. Sienna's voice filled the courtroom. Garrett is with me now. Once that baby is born, he's going to leave you for me. Did you say those words while she was 7 months pregnant? Yes, but in less than 5 minutes later, she was on the ground bleeding. Interesting timing. She fell. It was an accident. Like Rachel Montgomery fell like any pregnant woman who gets in your way. I didn't. Sienna's composure shattered. She looked panicked, trapped. No further questions, Kate said. Closing arguments were powerful on both sides. Sullivan emphasized reasonable doubt. Kate emphasized pattern and motive. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Charlotte held her breath. On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. Sienna's face went white. As they led her out in handcuffs, she looked at Charlotte one last time. Not with hatred, with understanding. She knew she'd lost. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Charlotte held Hope too close. Uncle Robert and Claire forming a protective barrier. Mrs. Brennan, how do you feel about the verdict? Grateful, Charlotte said simply. Grateful for justice. Grateful for my daughter. Grateful for everyone who stood with us. What about your husband? No, and I don't plan to. He made his choices. Do you feel vindicated? Charlotte thought about that. I feel like the truth came out, and that's all I ever wanted. The truth. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, Judge Blackwell gave Sienna Ford 5 years in prison. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Charlotte didn't attend. She watched from home with Hope sleeping in her arms. When it was over, Uncle Robert called. It's done. She's going to prison. Good. How are you feeling? And Charlotte looked down at Hope, now healthy and growing stronger. She thought about everything that had happened. The assault, the trial, the loss of her planned life. I'm feeling like a survivor, she said. Like someone who got broken but didn't stay broken. That's because you're stronger than you know, Charlie. Or maybe I just had people who wouldn't let me give up. Thank you, Uncle Robert, for everything. What? That's what family does. We show up, we stay, we fight. After they hung up, Charlotte carried Hope to the window. Outside, autumn was turning to winter. The trees were bare but not dead, waiting for spring. You know what, baby girl, Charlotte whispered. We're going to be okay. Better than okay. We're going to thrive. And for the first time in months, Charlotte actually believed it. The morning light filtered through the windows of Charlotte's new apartment, smaller than the townhouse she'd shared with Garrett, but it was hers. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall chosen by her alone. Hope babbled from her crib, that pre-cry sound that meant, I'm hungry and you have approximately 30 seconds. Charlotte smiled, lifting her daughter, now a healthy 14 pounds, into her arms. Good morning, troublemaker, she said, kissing Hope's forehead. Ready for breakfast. As she settled into the nursing chair, her phone buzzed. A text from Uncle Robert. Don't forget, interview with the Tribune at 10. I'll watch Hope if you need. Right. The interview about the legislation being proposed in Hope's name. The Baby Hope Act would strengthen penalties for assault against pregnant women and establish better protection protocols in medical settings. What do you think? Charlotte asked Hope, who was too busy eating to have an opinion. Should Mama become a public figure? Hope's answer was to grab Charlotte's finger and squeeze. I'll take that as a yes. At 9:45, Claire arrived holding coffee and pastries. Thought you might need this before the interview. How are you feeling? Nervous? I hate talking about what happened. Then talk about what you're going to do next. That's what matters. Claire set up breakfast while Charlotte burped Hope. Have you heard from Garrett? His lawyer sent divorce papers last week. I signed it to them. It's done. How do you feel about that? Charlotte thought about it. 6 months ago, the end of her marriage would have destroyed her. But now, relieved. The man I married disappeared long ago. I was just too stubborn to admit it. Signing those papers felt like closing a chapter I should have ended months earlier. The doorbell rang. The Tribune reporter had arrived. Marina Fletcher was in her 50s, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen everything journalism had to offer. She set up her recording equipment at Charlotte's kitchen table. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Mrs. Brennan, it's Ms. Brennan now, or just Charlotte. Charlotte, then, let's start with the obvious. Why now? You've turned down dozens of interview requests. Charlotte had thought hard about this answer because Representative Sarah Bennett is trying to pass legislation that could help other women. If my story can make even one person support that bill, then what happened to me means something. It becomes more than trauma. It becomes change. Tell me about the Baby Hope Act. It would create enhanced penalties for assault against pregnant women. Right now, in many states, attacking a pregnant woman is treated the same as attacking anyone else. But pregnant women are uniquely vulnerable. An assault doesn't just hurt them, it endangers their unborn child. Charlotte's voice strengthened. The act would also require hospitals to have better security protocols. What happened to me shouldn't be possible. You blame the hospital. No, and I blame the person who hurt me. But institutions can do better at protecting vulnerable people. That's not blame. That's reality. Marina made notes. There's been criticism that the bill is reactionary, that it came from one high-profile case rather than genuine need. How do you respond? I'd say they haven't been paying attention. Violence against pregnant women is horrifyingly common. Domestic violence, workplace harassment, assault by strangers. It happens every day. My case got attention because of who my husband was. But I'm not special. I'm just one of thousands. The difference is I survived and I have a platform. So I'm going to use it, even though speaking publicly means revisiting trauma. Yes, because my trauma isn't just mine anymore. It's part of a larger conversation about how we protect pregnant women, how we prosecute people who hurt them, how we support survivors. Charlotte met Marina's eyes. If telling my story one more time helps pass legislation that protects the next woman, then it's worth it. Marina asked more questions about the trial, Hope's health, Uncle Robert, what came next. Finally, she asked, what do you want people to know if you could tell the world one thing? What would it be? Charlotte thought about Hope sleeping in the next room, about the women who'd reached out, sharing their own stories. I want people to know that being a survivor doesn't mean everything's okay now. I still have nightmares. I still struggle with trust. My daughter was born 3 months early because of violence. That has consequences we're still monitoring. Charlotte's voice stayed steady. But I also want people to know that surviving is possible. That you can be broken and still heal. That you can lose everything you thought your life would be and still build something beautiful from what's left. Marina nodded. And what about forgiveness? I've forgiven myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it, for believing my marriage could survive something it couldn't. She paused. As for Sienna and Garrett, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about me refusing to carry their choices like weights around my neck. I don't forgive what they did, but I release the power it has over me. Perfect sense. After Marina left, Charlotte found Claire in the nursery, rocking a sleeping Hope. How'd it go? Claire whispered. Better than expected. I think I actually meant everything I said. 3 weeks later, Charlotte stood in the Illinois State Capitol building, Hope in her arms, watching as the legislature voted on the Baby Hope Act. Uncle Robert stood beside her. So did Claire. Representative Bennett had invited them personally. The chamber was packed. The vote began. Charlotte watched the board light up. The numbers climbed. 50 votes, 60, 70. When it hit the needed majority, the chamber erupted in applause. The Baby Hope Act had passed. Charlotte felt tears streaming down her face. Hope, confused by the noise, started to fuss. Charlotte bounced her gently. It's okay, baby girl. These are happy tears. We did it. Representative Bennett approached, her own eyes wet. Thank you, Charlotte. This wouldn't have happened without your courage. Later, at the press conference, Charlotte stood at the podium with Hope in her arms. Today, Illinois became the first state to pass comprehensive protection for pregnant assault survivors. The Baby Hope Act means women like me won't have to fight as hard for justice. It means hospitals will have protocols to protect pregnant patients. It means consequences for people who target the most vulnerable. She looked down at Hope, reaching for the microphone with chubby hands. My daughter was born 10 weeks early because someone chose violence. She spent her first month fighting to breathe, but she's here now, healthy and strong and perfect. And because of her, because of what we survived together, the next woman won't have to fight alone. That evening, back at the apartment, Charlotte gave Hope her bath. The baby splashed happily, giggling at her reflection. You know what today was about, Charlotte said, making sure what happened to us never happens to someone else. Now there are better protections, better laws, better chances for justice. Hope responded by splashing water directly into Charlotte's face. Thanks for that, Charlotte laughed. You're right. I'm being too serious. Let's just celebrate tonight. After Hope was asleep, Charlotte sat on her balcony with tea. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulations, interview requests, even a message from her mother. Saw the news. Proud of you. Sweetheart, you're stronger than I ever was. Charlotte stared at that message for a long time. She typed back, thank you. Love you. Mom. Another message appeared from Kate Morrison. Congratulations on the bill. You changed lives today. Also, Garrett signed over full custody. No fight. You're Hope's sole legal guardian now. Charlotte read it twice. Garrett had given up. She should feel victorious. Instead, she felt sad not for herself, but for Hope. Her daughter would grow up knowing her father chose not to be there. But Charlotte would be there. Uncle Robert would be there. Claire, her mother, the community of survivors they'd built. Hope would grow up surrounded by people who chose her every single day. That had to be enough. Charlotte looked up at the spring sky, stars barely visible through city lights. Somewhere out there was the life she'd imagined at 25. The perfect marriage, the beautiful home, the fairy tale ending. That life was gone. But this life, the one she was building from the wreckage, this life had truth in it, had purpose, had love that was chosen, not assumed. This life had hope. And maybe, Charlotte thought as she stood to go inside, that was the better story after all. Not the fairy tale that never existed, but the survival story that did. The one where the princess saved herself, protected her child, and changed the world a little bit in the process. Her phone buzzed one more time. Uncle Robert. Proud of you, Charlie. Your father would be too. Sleep well. Charlotte smiled and headed inside. Tomorrow there would be doctor appointments and laundry and all the ordinary chaos of single motherhood. There would be more interviews, more work to do, more stories to tell. But tonight she would just be Charlotte, just be Hope's mother, just be a woman who survived and learned to live again. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.